I don't know if you know this, but native Indians, they'll spend all summer preparing for the winter. And I heard this story once about these native Indians on a really remote reservation that appointed a new chief. But this new chief was kind of he was a modern chief, so he'd lived up in a little bit of a modern society. So when they would say, oh yeah, we can predict the weather by looking at the sky and looking at what's happening, he had no idea how it worked. And he wanted to kind of live in the traditions of this Native American tribe, so he decided he'd be a little bit pragmatic and say, okay, I think the weather's going to be cold. But just to be sure, one day he snuck out of the village, went a few miles down the road, found a phone box and phoned the weather service. And he said, can you tell me what the weather's going to be like in the winter? Do you think it'll be cold? And the meteorologist on the other side of the phone says, yeah, we think it's going to be quite cold. So he goes back to his tribe and says, listen, it's going to be a cold winter. We need to collect some more firewood. A couple of weeks later, he goes out of the village again to the phone box, rings the weather service again and says, how cold do you think it's going to be? And the weatherman says, well, do you know what? I think it's going to be a bit colder than we thought it was going to be. Thank you very much. He goes back to his village. He says, listen, this is going to be cold. Get some more wood. We need to prepare for a cold winter. A couple of weeks later, he goes back to the phone box again. He rings them up. He says, how cold is this winter going to be? The weatherman says, do you know what? I think this is going to be the coldest winter in history. The Indian says, how do you know? The man on the phone says, well, those Indians down the road, they're collecting firewood like crazy. I don't know about you, but I really like September. Actually, I genuinely like September because I found the weather's always better than it was in August. The roads are quieter. We lived in Devon for 18 years. September was gorgeous because all the tourists went home. The roads were quieter. It was lovely. And because I've been in education pretty much, apart from a short time where I worked for Marks & Spencer's eating cakes, but I'll tell you about that another time. I've spent pretty much my entire life, from the time of 4 years old, I spent my whole life in education. So my life doesn't run from January to December. My life runs September to August. And that's how everything kind of in my life went. But I loved September because, I don't know if you're a teacher or you're in education, September meant for me, no matter how bad last year was, September was my reset button. September was my chance to kind of press that button and set up myself for the year. And I remember those first few days back in my classroom when I was teaching, no children, just me, an empty classroom, and a staple gun. But it was great, because I got that chance to decide, how do I want this year to be? How do I want this year to be for me? So I'd get all my kind of materials prepared. I'd know where I'm going. I'd get all my planning. So for me, I loved September, because I'm a planner. I love to plan. So September, I got to say, okay, I'm going to plan what my year's going to be like. It's also exciting, if you're into sport, that the football season started. The rugby season's just about to start, which I'm very, very excited about. Now, I'm a Spurs fan, so August, September, and October are always brilliant. Rest of the year, not so much. But I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts. And the reason I talk about time and setting up things, and I'm going to use a couple of analogies this morning. Who remembers a show on TV called Quantum Leap? I loved Quantum Leap. If you don't know the story, it was a guy called Sam Beckett, and he invented this machine where he could go back in time, and the whole premise was he would go back, and the opening line of the sequence was this: he would go back to put right what once went wrong. So he had this opportunity to go back in time, and he meets people like Elvis, he meets Marilyn Monroe, he meets all these great people to try and put right something that once went wrong. Maybe you're a little bit younger and you remember Back to the Future. Great films. Films that define generations, actually. Incredible films. And Marty McFly, same presence, same premise. He would go back to the past to change something in the present. But the last film ends with this thought: the future hasn't been written yet. Your future is what you make it. Can I suggest, as we stand on the 1st of September, that from this point forward, your future hasn't been written yet. Your future from this point forward is only what you make it. Now, I don't want to get into a theological debate about God knowing the future. God knows the future. Guess what? We don't. And I have this position that whatever we do, we could have 6 roads in front of us. God knows what's going to happen at the end of those 6 roads, but those 6 roads are our choice. So we have that choice right at the start of September to say, okay, my future is what I make it. And on this theme of kind of sports and summer, I want you to cast your mind back, if you can, to 2010. The World Cup of South Africa. Do you remember that World Cup, anyone? Where we discovered the glory of a vuvuzela? Do you remember those matches? When you'd watch those games and it was just this constant for 95 minutes? Well, in the build-up, Nike released an advert that kind of sums up what I want to say this morning. I'm going to ask the guys to show it in a moment because it shows a group of individuals who have a choice. They can make history in one way or another. And what Nike did really well, they caught onto this opportunity or this potential to make history, to make an impact and to be remembered for it or just be forgotten. Nike told us in this advert we could be history makers. It's a great tagline. It says, we can write the future. Thanks, guys.
Droga pra pênalti. C'è Cannavaro, c'è il capitano, c'è Cannavaro. Now, go!
Now, I should point out, other football boots from other sports brands are available. What's funny was I was watching this. We get to watch this video 14 years kind of later, and Wayne Rooney looks exactly like that, which is brilliant. But here's the point. Our future hasn't been written yet. Our future is ours to write, and there are points in our lives where we're faced with a moment when we get to write our future, when we get to decide what gets written down in the pages of our lives. Can I suggest God is calling you to write a great future? One person agrees. The rest of you, you want your future to suck. I'm not going to suggest, I'm going to tell you. God wants you to write a great future, not just a half-decent future, not an average future, but a great one. Paul says this, we are God's masterpiece. That's who we are. That's our identity. That's who we are. We are created to be. I'm a child of God. We are God's masterpiece. Why are we God's masterpiece? Because we are created to do half-decent things, average things, run-of-the-mill things. We're created to do the good things he planned. Some translations say great things he planned for us in advance to do. There was a plan in advance of our lives, something God created us specifically for. The writer of Hebrews says this, you are meant for better things. Paul writes in several of his letters about the gifts that God makes available to us to fulfill the call on our lives. And I need to know this morning, whether you're here, whether you're watching online, that every one of you is designed for greatness. There's a spiritual DNA that is locked inside you. There's like this unique like tapestry of gifts, talents, dreams, desires, everything that makes you. God says he's your masterpiece, created to do the things he designed you to do. He's given you gifts and abilities that no one else has. Paul says you were made for things greater than you can imagine. He says this, all glory to God, who is able, through his mighty power at work within us, to accomplish what? Infinitely more than we might ask or think. You were born to be someone who could write the future. You were born to make history. If you've got your Bibles, I'd love you to turn to Joshua chapter 3. I just want to explain this passage a little bit and give you the background to it. Moses and the Israelites have left Egypt, and about 3 years into their trip, they come to the land of Canaan. And Moses sends 12 spies ahead to check out the city. 2 come back and say, yeah, we can take the city. But 10 of them come back and say, no, we can't do it. They're too big. They're too powerful. We just get slaughtered. And so God says, okay, you're going to wander for 40 years because you didn't have faith. And 40 years later, Moses has died. The Israelites are back in the same spot. And Joshua sends 2 spies across. And they meet a girl called Rahab. And they come back reporting, listen, the people in this town of Jericho, they are terrified of us. We can take this land. And so this is what happened. Joshua chapter 3, it says, early the next morning, Joshua and all the Israelites left Acacia Grove and arrived at the banks of the Jordan River where they camped before crossing. 3 days later, the Israelite officers went through the camp, giving these instructions to the people. When you see the Levitical priests carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, move out from your positions and follow them. Since you've never traveled this way before, they will guide you. Stay about half a mile behind them, keeping a clear distance between you and the ark. Make sure you don't come any closer. And then it says this line that I want to hone in on this morning. Purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among you. Purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among you. Now, if you go back into Old Testament history, there were purification rituals that the Israelites had to kind of do, and I won't go into those, but simply when God said purify yourself, it meant have a bath, change your clothes, and abstain from sex. But what they also do was they had to purify their hearts. So they had to confess their sins, they had to ask for forgiveness, to recommit again to God. And that makes total sense. You're about to break into something new. You're about to kind of take on something that you've never done before. You're about to take new ground. You're about to move forward in the things of God. You want to make sure you're spiritually ready. But it's interesting in this line, it says, purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders. And maybe you're there thinking, but I'm pure now. I heard that great story once of someone who was praying. They said, Lord, today I haven't sinned, I haven't sworn, I haven't drunk, I haven't abused anyone. I've done nothing wrong, but in 5 minutes I'll get out of bed and then I'm going to really need help. And maybe you're there thinking, I'm pure now, I'm clean now. God, why are you waiting till tomorrow? And I wonder if it's in this moment that this is not about purification for now. It's a reminder that holiness is a constant decision. That it's a constant, intentional decision that we stay pure. And God is reminding of that. What did he say to his ancestors? You need to be holy. Why? Because I'm holy. And being holy isn't something we can do for an hour and a half on a Sunday morning and just get on with our lives. Actually, it's a daily discipline, Paul says to Timothy, he says, if you keep yourself pure, not make yourself pure, if you keep yourself pure, if you can do that, you will be a special utensil for honorable use. Your life will be clean. You'll be ready for your master to use you. God might not use you today. He might not use you tomorrow. But if you can stay pure, if you can stay upright, if you can stay clean, then you're going to be ready when God calls. Purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great things. One of my favorite verses that we've kept coming back to as a church over the last couple of years maybe is this, that the eyes of the Lord search the whole earth in order to strengthen, so there's strength come in, those whose hearts are fully committed to him. God wants to give you strength. He wants to give you peace. He wants to give you vision. He wants to outwork his plans for your life, but he's looking for people who are committed to him. And I wrote this in my notes when I was kind of preparing for this. To escape from Egypt took courage. To leave Egypt took incredible courage. But to invade Jericho took commitment. They had to be brave enough to leave Egypt in the first place. But to invade Jericho, they needed commitment because they had to be pure now because God was going to do something in there tomorrow. And you'll see that play out in the next chapter. But I just really felt as we were preparing for this September, and as we go into our vision series next week, I really feel that's the message for us, that God's already gone ahead. God knows what he's going to do, something great, but he's saying, play your part now. Get ready now. Before you step into what God has in store for us, let's stay pure. Can I say it this way? Consecration isn't just for now, but consecration is for our future. And I want to encourage you, if you're looking to write your future from this point moving forward, God's already gone ahead, but he's saying, listen, consecrate yourself now. Do it today, and I'll move in your tomorrow. If I can paraphrase the book of Esther, Mordecai says these famous lines, who can say that you were not born for such a time as this? Could it be you were born for this moment? That your existence was planned by God for you to be right here, right now, to make a difference in your community, to make a difference in your friendship circles, to make a difference in your families. But there's a call where God says, listen, you've got to do something first. David Shearman's an old Assemblies of God pastor, incredible prophetic anointing, and he wrote a book about kind of going out and doing things for God. It's called Born to Win. But he says this, so many times we make God responsible for things happening or not happening. But our attitude should simply be this, if it's to be, it's up to me. I'll say that again. If it's to be, it's up to me. So make that practical. If you want a new job, if you decide, I need a new job, what are you going to do? Sit there and wait for a job to land in your lap? Or are you going to search for a job? Apply for a job, fill in application forms, go through an interview. And I'm not limiting God that he can't do the miraculous, but he won't do it if you're not prepared to go and get it. William Carey once said this, if you expect great things from God, you should attempt great things for God. There's a great verse in Deuteronomy 4 where Moses is giving a speech to the Israelites. They've left Egypt, and he says this, and he says there's a warning at some point, and I think it means where they are now. He says at some point you're going to find yourself somewhere you don't want to be. And they are. 40 years in exile. But Moses says, if from that place, the place you don't want to be, the place you never saw yourself, if from there you seek the Lord your God, you'll find him. If you seek him with all your heart and all your soul. If from there, I don't know where you are, but if from there, I don't know what your life is like, but if from there, I don't know how many mistakes you've made this summer, but if from there, I don't know how or why you got to the place you're in, but if from there, if you seek God with all your heart, guess what? You'll find him. Joshua said, purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among you. Can I promise you, and I say this every year, and I'll say it every year until Jesus takes me home, that this can be the best year of your life if it's the best year of your life spiritually. And I stand on that I promise if you decide to go all in with God and you say, okay, God, I'm going to give you my year. I'm going to go all in. I'm going to get to prayer meetings. I'm going to get to house group every time. I'm going to tithe and give properly. If you do that for 1 year, just for 12 months of your life, do it for 1 year. If you go all in, and if you don't have the best year of your life, come to me and I'll publicly apologize and admit I was wrong. But I promise you, if you go all in, you won't look back. Going back to the story of the Israelites, that first spying mission, they send these 12 spies, and Joshua and Caleb are the two that come back and say, yeah, we can do this, we can take this city, but the other 10 are afraid, and Joshua and Caleb are essentially, they're outvoted, and what happens is they go nowhere. They spend 40 years wandering in the desert, and when they try again, they find out, oh no, do you know what, we could have conquered it anyway. How many times has life been like that? When we haven't done something for whatever reason, and then we come back round to it, and then we find out, I could have done that in the first place. I've been there. And we go round and round in circles, waiting for that chance. Or some of us have said, do you know what? I wish I did that 5 years ago. I wish I'd taken that chance. I wish I'd gone for it. And it's interesting. Psychologists say this. We spend 80% of our time focusing on the past. We spend 15% of our time focusing on the present and only 5% on the future. Now, that sounds like a scary statistic, but I bet if you thought about it, you'd think, do you know what, that's true. That I spend most of my time thinking about the past. Do you know there's a reason why our rear view mirror is smaller than our windscreen? Because we're not going that way? Isaiah says this, forget the former things. Don't dwell on the past. Why? Because I'm doing a new thing. Now, I might be showing my age, but who remembers when Johnny Wilkinson was playing for England? If you're old enough, you remember Johnny Wilkinson. He shapes up to kick, and he adopts this pose that was copied all around the world by professionals. I remember playing for Crediton, this little kind of town in East Devon, and we were playing like proper farmers. But we played this one team, and the 10 for this team, it was, I don't know if it was Tiverton or one of the other kind of Devon towns, and their 10 did this. Like, it just got copied by everyone. And I read this interview, this isn't relevant, I just thought this is fascinating, where he talked about what he thinks about when he's in his thing. And he said he looks behind the post, and he imagines a lady sat behind the post holding a handbag in her lap. So when he kicks, he's not aiming for the posts. He's aiming for the woman. Actually, he's aiming for her bag. And that's his kind of mindset. He wants the ball to land in her handbag. And he says, everything else goes out of my mind, that I'm fixed on this woman's hand, this imaginary woman's handbag, that I'm going to drop the ball into her handbag. So he's not thinking about dinner. He's not kind of checking his Facebook. He's got one goal, that I'm going to drop the ball in this woman's handbag. And it says that after a training session, he would do, professional rugby player would train all day. And he said he would practice his penalties, and he wouldn't go home until he got 10 in a row. So if he got to 9 and he missed, he started again. That was his dedication to his craft. He scored 259 penalties, 35 drop goals, and 173 conversions for England. His combined kicking success rate is 80% over a 13-year career. That's pretty impressive. One of the best stats in rugby, by the way, but the reason I kind of give you that long kind of introduction, his kicking stat is 80%, which means it's not 100. Which means sometimes Johnny Wilkinson misses. Rugby World Cup in 2003 was England versus Australia. It was in Sydney. England were in the final. They beat the world champions in their own backyard. And I remember that morning really, really well, because it was a Sunday morning. And being the holy man of God that I am, I was in a pub in Newport. And I was watching the match in my Welsh shirt with a load of Welsh fans cheering on Australia. And during the game, much to our delight, if you remember the game, Johnny Wilkinson missed 3 drop goals and a conversion. He could have thought during that game, as the kind of minutes were wrapping up, do you know what? This drop goal thing isn't happening today. This is not happening. I'm not going to do any more drop goals. I've messed 3 up already. I'm not going to do it again. But if you know that, if you've watched that World Cup, what happened? He kicked one more. 28 seconds left of extra time, Johnny Wilkinson chose to make history. So 2 things had to happen. He had to forget his past failures. And he also needed those thousands of hours of training and dedication to give him the skill to land that drop goal. Isaiah says, forget the former things. Don't dwell on the past. Joshua says, purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among you. The Israelites are told to purify themselves because something was coming, something great. Great wonders were about to take place in front of their eyes, but they had to be ready. And part of being ready was forgetting what was behind and making sure they were focused on what God had for them. Luke 9:62 in the Message says this: no procrastination, no backward looks. You can't put God's kingdom off until tomorrow. Seize the day. Philippians 3:13 is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. It says, I'm focusing all my energies on one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. And it's interesting, in the Greek, we read that as 2 separate things. But in the Greek, it's one action, that we forget the past and we look forward at the same time, because you can't do one without the other. The writer of Hebrews writes something similar when he or she, I'm going to say that, they say, how do we run the race? We run the race by keeping our eyes on Jesus, forgetting everything else. And the Greek they use is really interesting. When they say fixing our eyes on, it's the Greek word apharentes. And it doesn't just mean focus on Jesus, but it means to intentionally turn away from everything else. Because I don't know, I could be looking this way. I could be looking at Annette and Wendy, and I could be looking straight at them, but over here I can see things. Over here, someone's chewing a wine gum. Over here, someone's yawning. Over here, someone's picking their nose. And I'm looking here, but I can see here. Someone's taking wine gums out of their mouth very, very quickly. Because I'm looking here, but there are things in my periphery that I'm noticing. And slowly, if I'm not careful, if I don't keep my focus, this is going to drag me away. Are you with me? And so I've got to be really, really intentional. Then Hebrews says, focus on that. Forget all this. Don't look at the track. Don't look at the crowd. Don't even look at the other runners. Don't look at the past. Don't let it even get in your periphery. Focus on what is ahead. So how do we do it? Well, again, I want to continue this sport analogy, because when a rugby player or a football player is training throughout the season, they need to make sure they're eating the right food. They need to train hard. They need to be focused on what they're doing and why they're doing it. Can I tell you, the reason that we train, the reason we live our Christian lives, the reason we try and eat the right spiritual food, the reason we train, the reason we pray, the reason we read our Bibles, the reason we worship is because our focus is on what's ahead. We're about to start 2 weeks of prayer and fasting. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Some of you, that time just doesn't exist. I get that. It's not about getting up at 7 a.m., but it's about saying, okay, I'm going to have the desire and the discipline to say, okay, God, I'm going to put you first. And we'll send you some stuff about fasting and the different ways you can do that. I'm not saying starve yourself for 2 weeks, all right? There are different ways you can fast and different methods. We'll send some bits out to you. But I'll just kind of suggest this. If anyone has done these 10 days of prayer and fasting, or just 10 days of prayer and solidly and gone all in for it, I guarantee no one is there thinking after those 10 days, my prayer life is worse. Your prayer life's better, because you put the work in. There are spiritual muscles that kind of get attuned to doing that sort of thing. And in physiology, there's this thing called muscle memory, where your muscles remember how to do something. It's where, if you're a nail biter, it's where that habit is so hard to break, because your muscles have learned to do that. And they've just learned to do it kind of almost instantly. And that's why it's so hard to break, because you're having to train your muscles not to do it. I read that if you play golf, you've got to swing consistently 100 times for your muscles to remember how to do it properly. I got 98 to go. But muscle memory, playing piano or typing, anyone that can touch type is muscle memory. Where you do it so regularly that actually you don't have to think about it. Driving is muscle memory. How many of you think about changing gear? You just do it. Because it's that muscle memory. You've done it so regularly that it stops becoming an effort, stops becoming something you think of. You just do it. Here's the slightly challenging question. How many of us need to build the muscle memory to pick up this? How many of us need to build the muscle memory to stop at the start of our day and pray? 2 Timothy 4 says this: spend your time and energy in training yourself for spiritual fitness. Physical exercise has some value, but spiritual exercise is much more important because it promises a reward in this life and the next. You can have a six-pack now. Doesn't matter in heaven. No one cares. But your training now, your spiritual training, it'll be worth it. There's a prize to be gotten in this life and the next. And so these Israelites, they had to be ready. They had to purify themselves because there was something great waiting for them. And then we get to the exciting bit, and you can read the text. I'm not going to read it, but they get to the banks of the river, and they're following the ark. So they're following the presence of God in the ark. They get to the banks of the Jordan, and God says to Joshua, "Okay, send the priests in." And the priests go in, and it says that as the priests set foot in the water banks up and starts to kind of disappear. Now, and I don't know if Joshua knew this was going to happen. I don't know if Joshua was speaking prophetically. But it's interesting because Joshua talks to the people. He says, listen, you set foot in this water. And he uses this phrase, the Lord of all the earth. The God who controls the tides, controls the winds, controls the waves. The God who controls gravity, time, chemistry, biology, physics. That God, the God of all the earth, he's about to go before us. And so they get to the Jordan. I'm going to read this because I want to get this right. The River Jordan was 100 foot wide and somewhere between 10 and 20 foot deep. And the text tells us that this flood season, so this river is as deep as it's going to get. And the priests start to walk into the river. And as soon as their feet touch the water on this side stops flowing. And don't misread the text, because it's not like the parting of the Red Sea. It's not like this kind of split in the water. What actually happens, the water just stops flowing upstream. It stops flowing from a town called Adam. And I really like the irony in that. There's Adam in Adam. I love that. So eventually the water has stopped way up here. So here, the water just kind of flows on into the Dead Sea. So there's dry ground. Now that's an incredible miracle. That a raging flooded river would just stop flowing. But what's interesting is where they crossed over wasn't where the miracle started. Because the town of Adam, where the water stops flowing, is 20 miles away. It's 20 miles over here, which is about 3 hours walking time. So when I worked this out, the Jordan was fast flowing, so the Jordan's maybe flowing, 7 to 10 miles an hour. So if the water is cut off up here at Adam, it would take 2 hours for the results to be felt here. So here's my point. For them to get right to the edge of the Jordan at the moment the water started to be cut off here meant that God was working 2 hours upstream. Are you with me? God was already working 2 hours ahead of that point where they stepped in. After 40 years of wandering, God times the miracle so that it happens at the exact time the priests step forward. Can I tell you, God goes before you? And maybe he's working on your behalf, that he's timing his move so that it occurs at the exact time you step out in faith. So if we knew that God was already 20 miles ahead of you, if you knew God was already working 2 hours ahead, that he would time his miracle to the point you step out in faith, what would you step out for? What would you pray for if you knew God was already 2 hours ahead of you? What would you believe for if you knew God was already working 2 hours ahead of where you were? Joshua says, purify yourselves. Why? Tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among you. The Lord of all the earth. He's already 2 hours ahead. The God who holds the whole earth in his hands, he goes before us. He's just saying, just step in. Because great things are going to happen. I want to close with one more sports analogy, and then I'll invite the band back up. I'll invite the band back up now if I can. I'm aware of time. Last one, in the 1995 Rugby World Cup final. Some of us might remember this, maybe not. South Africa were drawing 12-all with New Zealand. New Zealand tournament favourites. Remember Jonah Lomu burst onto the scene and rampaged through the whole England squad? Anyone remember that? I loved it. South Africa are 7 minutes away from the drawing 12-all. There's 7 minutes left, and this was a cup final. South Africa were never meant to have got to. They weren't even meant to be in it. They'd been banned from the previous 2 World Cups because of apartheid, and in 1995 they hosted the World Cup in the middle of a massive political unrest, and apartheid was still it had gone, but it was still a memory. The national rugby team, who were almost, apart from Chester Williams, they were almost completely white. I don't know, 20-something players, all white, 1 black player, and the black population of South Africa hated them because they played a white sport. There's a great scene in a film called Invictus where Nelson Mandela, Morgan Freeman, he's at an England-South Africa game, and he notices that all the white people are cheering South Africa, but all the black people are cheering England. Because they hated them for playing a white sport. But this team of players stood up, they played on, and they made history. And actually, this moment in the World Cup, there's an incredible moment where Nelson Mandela, he's donning a Springbok shirt, which a black South African would never, ever wear. He's handing the trophy to Francois Pienaar. It changed millions of people's opinions. It was a real pivotal moment. But in the middle of this game, 12-all, 7 minutes left, Francois Pienaar, who's the South African captain, he huddles the team, he says this, heads up, look in my eyes, listen to your country. 7 minutes. This is it. This is our destiny. Can I suggest, as Joshua stood in front of the Israelites, he said the same words. Listen to your country. This is it. This is our destiny. I want to encourage you this morning as we step into a new year, you would make a decision to purify yourselves. Because if we do that today, tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among us. We're going to take communion in a few moments, and we've deliberately put communion at the end of our service. Because communion is a reenactment of a portion of a larger meal that Jesus had with his disciples. And it's Paul in his letter to some Christians in Corinth. He gives us the narrative of communion as we know it today. And we'll read that in a moment. But he says this. We should examine ourselves before eating the bread and drinking the cup. And he's saying, listen, don't come into this thinking you've got it all together. Don't take this bread and this wine without making sure your relationship with God is exactly what it should be. And so before we pass the bread and the juice around, I want to give you a moment to do just that. To have a heart-to-heart with God. Maybe you need to take a moment to say, God, I'm just sorry that I didn't put you first. Maybe this is a moment where you say, okay, new season, new start. I'm gonna take a moment to write the future by making Jesus Lord of my life again. And I don't say that with any condemnation whatsoever. The Bible says there's no condemnation. For those who belong to Jesus, all we've got to do is choose to belong. And I love the lines of this song, and as Michelle put out I upset her a little bit because I messed her song list around. But she sent out this song list, and I love the lines of this song because it says, Lord, you've searched me. God, you know what I'm like. You know what I do. You know how I think. You know how I mess up. But even when I fail you, I know you love me. But then it says this, at the cross, I bow my knee. That's the choice. That we choose to make him Lord. That we choose to surrender. That we choose to give God our best. Why? Because he gave everything for us. So before we take communion, I'm going to invite the servers up in a couple of moments, because I want us all to have this moment. The band are going to lead us, and I just want to invite you where you are to examine yourself, purify yourself, consecrate yourself. Take some time with God, not just for now that we might have a holy 5 minutes, but do it for your future. Do it now so you can begin to write your future. Do it now so that tomorrow God can do great things. Thanks, man.